This is a Monty moment. I'm Johnny Montalbano. We get you ready for week 8 of the college football season as we now enter the second half of the year, coming off an unbelievable, memorable week last Saturday, where obviously the big story, number 3 Alabama falling to number 6 Tennessee 52-49, and I think they're still celebrating down there in Tennessee. Just an unbelievable matchup and outcome, a memorable day down there in Tennessee. And really, it was a Saturday full of upsets in college football, where you had number 3 Alabama falling, number 7 USC fell to number 20 Utah late and close, and then also Oklahoma State, who had a lead against TCU, they fell in overtime. So that takes really the Pac-12 and the Big 12 out of it. So actually, if you really look at it from an Alabama perspective, a tough loss, but probably got fortunate, because now you look at it, what does it mean for the college football playoff picture? It probably right now is 3 conferences you're just talking about. The SEC, which the question's now going to be 3 teams possibly in the playoff. We'll have to see. You know, you've got the Big Ten, obviously, whether it's going to be Ohio State or Michigan, and the ACC. Is Clemson going to run the table here, win the ACC championship, and get in? I think that's their only hope. And you know what? I haven't been really high on Clemson this year, but if you look at them, they're undefeated, 7-0 going into their matchup Saturday against Syracuse, 5-0 in ACC play. It hasn't been pretty at times, but they've been getting the job done. And a big game for them coming up this Saturday, and that's one of the games we're going to have these picks this year. So as far as the college football playoff goes, and we'll have our first official college football playoff ranking coming up on Tuesday, November the 1st, and it'll be a great time for us. We'll recap it here on our Monty Moments. But the playoff picture right now, it's kind of wide open. You know, we've had years in the past where it looks like we know what 4 teams are going to get in. The only question is going to be is where your seeding is going to be. Well, now you look at it with the loss that Alabama had. Now you got to put Tennessee right up there. I mean, Tennessee right now, they have the best resume of any team in the country. They have the best win of anybody in the country right now. So right now, Tennessee's got to be considered a team. Michigan's still got to be right up there. I think it's going to come ultimately down to their matchup against Ohio State to end the season, and then obviously in the Big Ten championship game, whatever happens there. But you look at it right now, I mean, you're looking at possibly 3 teams with Georgia, with Bama, and with Tennessee. And Alabama is not done yet. You know, they got very fortunate with the other 2 losses in the Pac-12 and the Big 12. But now they've got to go run the table. They've got to play convincing football and win the SEC championship. And you know what? A 1-loss Alabama team will get in if they run the table, win the SEC championship. And then your only question is going to be, if Clemson loses out, then does Tennessee get in? Because you know what? Right now, Tennessee, they could run the table. They could even if they lose to Georgia in a couple of weeks, they could go 11-1 and have their big win against the potential SEC champions. So there's really a lot of avenues that the competition committee, the selection committee, is going to have to look at. And right now we're looking at a possibility of a number of outcomes. And again, if Clemson loses, then it opens up another door. So there's really a lot of scenarios that are going to come over these next couple of weeks. Maybe we'll see what happens here. I know Tennessee's got a favorable matchup coming up this Saturday, so you got to think they're going to win. Georgia is off, so they're not going to matter. Ohio State's playing Iowa. So I don't think we're going to get much change unless you see some major upsets here. And we'll find out what comes up this weekend. But now getting to look to this Saturday, 5 top 25 showdowns on the Week 8 college football schedule. I'm going to pick a couple of them in our picks. And we had a good week last week. We were a perfect 3-0, even though 2 of our teams that we thought would win outright did not, but they did cover. So 3-0 last week. Still in the hole, though, for the season. We're 9-12. We're going to try and get to 500 if we can. If not, 1 or 2 games outside of that, because we're going to pick a couple of interesting nuggets here with the picks this week. So you head down to the second half of the college football season. You're going to soon have your college football playoff rankings coming out. It's going to add a whole new element of discussion for not only us here on our Monty Moments, but also on our regular show Game On. And really now it's wide open as it's ever been. We've had years where we already know the 4 teams. Now you're talking about 5, 6, maybe even 7, maybe even the ACC as a possibility of getting a couple of extra teams besides Clemson into that conversation. It really is more wide open than it's ever been before. I think we know which teams are favored, but you know what? It's still wild. We still got a half a year to go. So we'll find out what happens. I don't know if you're going to get much clarity this week with the games that are going on, but still nevertheless worth watching here as we are now in the second half of the college season. Well, like I said, 3 games again this week. We're trying to build off a perfect 3-0 week last week. Still under 500 for the year, but let's see what we can do for our 3 picks this week. Game number 1, I'm going to start right at 12 noon Eastern, and we're going to go for a big ACC showdown here. It's number 14 Syracuse travels down to Clemson to take on the number 5 ranked Tigers, and 2 of the 9 remaining undefeated teams in the FBS will match up here at 12 p.m. Eastern on ABC. And Clemson coming in here with as a 13.5 point favorite, so kind of a big number. Now I know they've won 37 straight games at home, but you look at this Syracuse team, and you know what? They haven't had really many challenging games on their schedule, just playing who they have to play. But you look at this team, and they have the variety to run on this Clemson defense, better than most teams on the schedule. You know, the great pairing of quarterback Garrett Strader and running back Sean Tucker, something to watch in this one. And the Tigers did beat Florida State. It looked pretty convincing. The final score ended up being pretty close, 34-28 last Saturday. But you go in depth into that matchup, and you saw that Clemson allowed Florida State to run it for over 200 yards last Saturday, as well as 26 missed tackles in that game. So that's an issue that if you're Clemson, you have to get corrected as you line up against this 1-2 punch that Syracuse can offer. And I know that Clemson has scored 30-plus points in 7 straight games. It looks like maybe their offense is finally getting it going here after kind of a rough start, and you know, some other things too. It looks like DJ has been playing a lot better as of late, but still at times you look at this team and it just doesn't have the same firepower as prior Dabo Swinney led teams. And I think they're going to win this game, Clemson. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think Syracuse has the talent or the ability to pull off the major upset special in this spot. But does Clemson have the ability to blow out teams? I mean, you've looked at a lot of these games and they just haven't really been able to do that. And this is such a big number here that you could definitely see Syracuse at least keeping this one within the number, and I think they're going to do that. I think Clemson will win. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not going to go for total upset special in this one, but I think they're going to improve to 8-0. They'll go to 6-0 in ACC play and continue to build up that resume. But Syracuse's magical ride, I think, is going to make it closer than that 13.5. So take Clemson to win, but for the picks here as well, Syracuse with the points in game number 1 on Saturday. Game number 2, big SEC matchup at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS is the 7th-ranked Ole Miss Rebels, also a team trying to make kind of an outside shot at the college football playoff, but this is a big one for them here too, as they go on the road to take on LSU, again at 3:30 Eastern, and it's the Tigers who are favorites by 2.5 in this one, and kind of a tough matchup to predict, but definitely one worth watching here. But you look at these two teams. Ole Miss is in the top 15 in the nation in yards per game and yards per play. They're 3rd in the nation in third down conversion rate at just under 57%. And their offense has only allowed 2 sacks on the season. But, you know, again, looking at their schedule, their upcoming schedule, pretty backloaded with challenging competition. So it's something to watch. And if you've been watching their games this year, they've had moments this season where they just don't look like that dominant, undefeated squad. And you know, we'll find out what happens here. But then there's LSU, and the Tigers' offense, it's centered around Jaden Daniels. You know, he leads the team in passing. He leads the team in rushing. But he's also been sacked more than any other SEC quarterback. And you're doing that against a Rebels defense who has sacked the quarterback 19 times on the season. And LSU has struggled against their 2 prior big opponents at home. So with a low enough spread in this matchup, I'm going to take the Rebels plus 2.5. in a game that I think is going to come down to who has the ball last. So Ole Miss, 7th-ranked team in the country, plus 2.5 is the pick for game number 2. And then finally, I'm going to pick a team that I have not picked all season. You know, it's one that's the big story in the country right now, one that we let off this Montie moment with, and that's Alabama. You know what? I was hesitant to pick their game last week against Tennessee, but I'm going to go to the well this time, and take them at home against 24th-ranked Mississippi State. And, boy, this is such a tough spot for Mississippi State to face Bama off a loss. You know, I call them Mad Alabama, and they are going to even be more dangerous than a normal Alabama, even this one that definitely has its flaws. It's not the most dominant Nick Saban-led Crimson Tide team in years past, but The Bulldogs, they're going to catch the scarier version of Bama this week in Tuscaloosa. And you look at the history of this matchup between the two teams. Mississippi State has not beaten Bama since 2007. And I think Mike Leach's squad is going to be in for a very, very tough day. The Tide secondary, I think, is going to be able to limit the effectiveness of quarterback Will Rogers and receiver Caleb Ducking. And again, Bama, I know they've been very undisciplined this year. Two of their most penalized games under Nick Saban have been this year in Texas, where they just eked out a 1-point win, and obviously last week the loss at Tennessee. But you look at this matchup, Nick Saban's going to want to leave his foot on the gas a little bit longer than normal in order to keep his offense clicking as Bama hits the stretch run here, because this is a stretch for Alabama of some very challenging competition, and now they have to run out the string here in order to get into the playoffs. So a lot to watch here on the Tide side, but I do think they covered this number as high as it is. Bama is favored by 21, and even if they show some flaws, I think it's still good enough. I think they come out, I think they're going to put up 40 points at least on Mississippi State, but this is a matchup you just got to watch here and see how the things go. And I will say one thing, though, also with Bama. If it wasn't for Bryce Young, and I think right now you have to admit Bryce Young is the best player in the country. I think he is well on his way to winning another Heisman Trophy again this year, because if it wasn't for Bryce Young, Bama would have lost that game by 3 scores last week at Tennessee. I mean, he did everything possible. Coming back from that shoulder injury, another week now, recovered from that. I think he's only going to get stronger. I think this is a great shot for Bama to put up a lot of points, show that they're back, maybe put out the hesitation for a lot of people, including myself, for at least 1 week here before they have a big matchup in a couple of weeks against Ole Miss on the road. But Bama's a different team at home. I think they're going to dominate this one. I think it's going to be very, very ugly. So Alabama, even laying 21 points with their flaws, with their undisciplinedness, I think it's still all right. You might sweat a little bit in this one, but go ahead and take Bama laying 21 at home against 24th ranked Mississippi State to wrap up the day on Saturday. And we'll find out if any major upsets happen, what the college football playoff picture looks like. Again, we're a week and a half away from getting the first official college football playoff rankings, which are different than the AP Top 25 poll. But that's what we're going to do. So the 3 picks for week number 8 in college football. I'm going to take Syracuse getting 13.5 on the road at Clemson. I'm going to take Ole Miss getting 2.5 again at LSU. And I am going to take Alabama for the first time this year. Their first time I'm picking them. Alabama game. I'm going to take them laying 21 at home against Mississippi State in week number 8 in college football. For more, like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB, and you can follow me on Twitter at Montalbano NY. This has been a Monty moment, and I'm Johnny Montalbano.